All right, so we'll get started here in a moment. So please remember to sign in like I see most of y'all have. Also, we will be going over, if you downloaded the notes, we are on 10E. We'll get started here in a few minutes. All right, so let's get started. Let me go ahead and share this. All right. So, like I said, we will get going. We have been talking about data sets, and if you have a bunch of numbers all together, how do you describe those data sets in a useful way without just listing off all the numbers? You have a lot of information or a lot of data, but not a lot of useful information. So we've talked about where certain specific pieces of data are in the entire set. When we talked about quartiles and percentiles, we talked about the range of data. So how spread out is it? We've also talked about the different types of middle estimates, which are mean, median, and mode. The mean is what we classically know as the average, but the median is the number that's in the middle of the data set, and the mode is the number that appears most often in the data set. So these are just a few things that we have seen and talked about. So with that, we're going to discuss means and what are called weighted averages. So as an example, suppose on 4 of your 5 biology tests, you scored 90, 95, 97, and 90, respectively. You can exempt the final if your average on the 5 tests is greater than or equal to 85. What do you need to make on your last test in order to exempt the final? So how would we start to solve this? Anybody got any ideas or suggestions? I wanted to start to solve this. All right, all
You come up with an inequality, right?
I'm sorry?
You write an inequality first?
Well, you could write an inequality, for sure. So let me get my numbers up. 90, 95, 97, 90, and you'll need 85. So okay, so we're going to set up, you said, an inequality. What inequality would you like to set up?
I forgot what it said, like x is like greater than or equal to 85, I think.
All right, so x greater than equal to 85. All right, so that's an inequality. What is x in this case?
Would it be the mean?
I'm sorry?
Would it be like the mean, the answer you get for the mean?
Yeah, so x is the mean of 5 tests. Not texts, tests. So, how do you find the mean of the 5 tests?
You add them up and divide by 5.
Okay. So 90 plus 95 plus 97 plus 90 plus what?
85?
No, because 85, remember, is not a score on a test. It is the required overall score that you need. So what we're asking is, the question is, what does this last test need to be in order for, we're gonna kind of replace some things here. So the mean has to be greater than or equal to 85. The mean of those 5 tests. So the thing we don't know is x over 5 greater than or equal to 85. Okay. So now what do we do? The first thing I might do is add up these 4. So what do you get when you add those 4 up?
You get 372.
Yep. So now we have 372 plus x over 5 is greater than or equal to 85. So next, I would probably multiply this 5 over. So what is 85 times 5?
425.
Okay, so now we have x plus 372 greater than or equal to 425. So x equals 425 minus 372 equals what?
$53.
Yep, 53. Okay. So 53. Yeah. So if you score at least a 53, then you can exempt the final. All right, good stuff. Well, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with means and weighted averages? So there was a decent amount of math-y stuff that kind of went into this, right? There was fair enough. But there's actually a slightly easier way to do this using weighted averages. So a weighted grade, share the other screen. A weighted grade happens when you have different percentages associated with different categories. Another place this comes up when grading stuff is like when I say your homework is X percent and your tests are this much percent. I'm using a weighted average structure. Often, and average is given to each category before it is multiplied by the weight. This occurs frequently in your college courses. Example, in particular class, the weights are 10% homework, 50% tests, 20% quizzes, and 20% final exam. So, given these categories, homework 10%, you got an 85 average. Then tests are 50% with a 68. Quizzes 20%. With a 75. And final exam is 20%. And made it 63. So the question is, given all of these, do you pass the class with a C? Let's assume C is 72, 80. Well, so to do a weighted average, you multiply the average of that section times its weight. So 10% in decimal is 0.1. And 68 times 0.5 plus 0.2 times 75 plus 0.2 times 63. So the question is, did we pass with a 70? What happens when you multiply all those out? What do you get? So I get, this is equal to 70.1. So we got to see. Woohoo! We did it. This is the basic weighted average structure. Usually, what happens is everybody has an equal weight up to now. So everybody has the same amount of weighting in their respective, like when you're taking an average, you divide the total by each, or by how many things there are in that data set. But now each one isn't worth quite the same. They have different weights, is what we mean by weighting. So let's read. So weighted average, in which you don't have data in every category, is calculated by adding up the weighted values and then dividing by the sum of the weights. A formula that you can write for this process looks like this. Weight times grade weight 1 times grade 1 plus weight 2 times grade 2 plus weight 3, on and on forever. You divide that by the number of weights, where the W's are the given weights in the problem, usually written as a decimal, and the G's are the grade for that category. Note that a value of G may need to be calculated as an average first. If the weights add to 100%, then we don't need to divide by all of them because the sum is just 1, which is what happened in this last example, is all of the weights added up to 100%. So at the end, technically, we didn't really divide by anything. We just divided by 1 because all of the weights added up to 1. So this is the reasoning behind this weighted average deal. So let's look at further example. In a particular class, the weights, 10% homework, 50% tests, quizzes. So suppose you earned a 80 homework average, 65 test average, and a 70 quiz average. What is your current grade in the class? So this is a question that gets asked to me a lot, asking me to give you your grade, and I don't run these constant calculations because it is a lot of work to do randomly for individuals. The way I've got it set up is does it for the class as a whole, but you can do it individually given the information we are learning today. So the weights are the same. So we have a 80 in homework, a 65 test average, and 70 quiz average. What is our current grade in the class? So how do I find our current grade in the class?
You just multiply the grade by its weighted average, right?
Okay, so 0.1 times 8, or 80, 0.5 times 65, 0.2 times 70, okay? So what do we get when we multiply all of these things out? Anybody?
What was the question?
Multiply these out. What do you get?
I got 27.59. 0.459.
So here you should get 8 plus, this is 32.5 plus 0.2 times 70 is 14. So add those together, you get 22 plus 32.5 is 54.5. So is that our current grade in the class?
No,
No, it's not. Why not?
because you ain't took the final yet, right?
Because we haven't taken the final yet. So this right now assumes that we have taken the final and we had a 0 on it. But that's not the case. It just isn't, it's not part of the grade yet. So remember, the other step is we have to divide by the sum of the weights. Well, what are the weights? What are the weights that were used in calculating that 54.5?
50, 20, and 10, right?
Yeah. So we're dividing by 0.1 plus 0.5 plus 0.2. What is 0.5 plus 0.1 plus 0.2?
It'll just be 0.8, right? 5.
0.8. And so when you do that, 54.5 over 0.8 is actually 68.125. So our current grade is 68.125. And this is entirely because we don't have all of the grades entered in yet. We don't have, we haven't even had the chance to have done everything yet. So it can't really count against us if it hasn't even happened yet. This is part of my issue with calculating y'all's grades in the class, is your homework is technically not due until the very end of the semester. So do I just not include it? Or, because then you think you're maybe doing better than you are at the moment if you haven't done any of the homework. Or maybe you think you're doing worse than you actually are because you've done a lot of the homework. So I don't know exactly, I can't go through and calculate everything with a bunch of different possibilities and all this, but it's actually pretty easy for you to do that using what you're learning here today. So I highly suggest that you make use of that. Some good practice, some good understanding. So let's look at earlier. So on this last question, what do we need? What do we need to make on the final in order to pass with a C. So given all of this, currently we have a 68.125. The question becomes, plus 0.2 times x so we need to see, you could set up the an inequality like you had suggested previously, but for our purposes, we're looking for the minimum. So the idea is that you need to make at least this much to get the C that you so desire. So yeah, that's our question. What do we need to make on the final to get that C? And that would be given by this value of x. So let's solve for it. What do you get when you add up all of these things? So when you added up all of these, it was what?
0.8.
So we're adding that. So what is 0.8 plus that?
Is it 1?
It's 1, correct. Yeah. So since we're dividing by 1, we can really just now ignore all of that. So when we were adding up all of these, what did we say that equals?
Like 54.5 or something like that.
Yep, very good. Pen. So we have 54.5 plus 0.2 x equals 70. What is 70 minus 54.5?
$15.5.
Yep. So we have to divide this 0.2x to get rid of it. Nope, sorry. But what is dividing by 0.2 is the same as multiplying by what? So this is the same thing as multiplying by 5. So
I got 77.5.
I did too. So in order to pass the class, you need a 77.5. Now, assuming that your teacher only gives grades in like whole number percentages, and assuming they're not going to like round anything, you really need a 78, because if you got a 77, it's a little bit less. And this is a mean teacher who doesn't round anything, is rude, I guess. But basically, you need a 78 in order to pass with a C. So let's look at that first example we did, where we had the 5 tests, and we were looking for what we needed to make on the last one. So we had $90 plus $95 plus $97 plus $90 plus X over 5 equals 85. So one thing you can do is combine all of these into their own kind of thing, and you get something that looks like this. So what is the average of these tests? Well, it's 90 plus 95 plus 97 plus 90 over 4, which is what? $372 over 4. So you made, on the first 4 tests, average of 93 every time. So what you can do here is actually include them all together. So on 80% of your tests, you got an average of 93. And then the last test that you're going to take is 20%. So 0.8 times 93. So X equals 85 minus 74.4.2, which is 10.6 times 5, 53. So this is how this